Here's a man who just won the longest war anyone had ever heard of. He's a genius. He built a giant wooden horse, hid an army inside it, and used it to burn an entire city to the ground. Now he just has to sail home. It's about a 2-week trip. It's going to take him 10 years. Why? Because on the way, he is going to blind a giant, insult the god of the ocean, get every single one of his men killed, sail to the land of the dead, and turn down the chance to live forever. His name is Odysseus. This is the story of the worst trip home ever taken, and all he wanted was to go home. This story is almost 3,000 years old. Long before anyone wrote it down, singers performed it out loud from memory, nearly 12,000 lines of it. For a crowd around a fire, we call it the Odyssey. It is one of the oldest stories in the entire Western world. And this summer, someone spent $250 million turning it into a movie, so it clearly still works. Coming up in the next 10 minutes, one witch, one one-eyed giant, a bag full of wind, a trip to the underworld, a very good dog, and 108 uninvited house guests. Welcome to Sketchy History. To understand the trip, you need one fact about the man. Odysseus was king of Ithaca, a small rocky island where the goats pretty much outnumbered the people. He wasn't the strongest king in Greece. He wasn't the richest. He was the cleverest. When the whole Greek army spent 10 years failing to break into the walled city of Troy, it was Odysseus who finally cracked it with a trick. He built an enormous wooden horse, hid his best soldiers inside, and left it at the gates, like a peace offering. The Trojans wheeled it in themselves. That night, the Greeks climbed out, opened the gates, and Troy fell. 10 years of war ended by one very good prank. Troy was ash. Time to go home. But while Odysseus is trying to get home, home is falling apart. Everyone assumes he's dead, and a dead king's throne and his wife are suddenly up for grabs. So 108 men move into his palace, uninvited, and refuse to leave. They're called the suitors, and they are the worst house guests imaginable. They eat his food, drink his wine, bully his servants, and each one demands that his wife, Penelope, hurry up and pick a new husband. But Penelope doesn't believe he's dead, so she stalls. She tells them she'll choose the day she finishes weaving a funeral shroud, and every single night, in secret, she quietly unravels everything she wove that day. She keeps this up for 3 years. The cleverest man in Greece had married the cleverest woman in Greece. But the trick can't last forever, and somewhere out on the sea, the clock is ticking on her husband. So, where is he? 10 years earlier, Odysseus sails away from Troy with 12 ships and about 600 men. It goes wrong almost immediately. The first island they raid, they actually win, and then his men refuse to leave. They stop to party on the beach. The locals come back with an army, and Odysseus loses 72 men before he's even out of sight of the place. Lesson 1. His own crew is the real danger. Next, they land on the island of the lotus eaters, where the local plant works like a drug. One bite and you forget your home, your family, your whole life. You just want to lie there and eat more of it. Odysseus has to physically drag his weeping men back onto the ships. And then they meet the Cyclops. They wander into a cave stacked with cheese and sheep, free food, and get trapped when the owner comes home. His name is Polyphemus, a one-eyed giant the size of a house. He rolls a boulder across the door, and, to make a point about guests who let themselves in, he eats 2 of the men. Raw. Odysseus needs a plan, so he offers the giant a skin of very strong wine and waits for the questions to start.
Good wine, little thief. Tell me your name and I will give you a gift.
My name is nobody. My mother, my father, all my friends. They all call me nobody.
Then here is your gift, nobody. I will eat you last.
The giant laughs at his own joke, drains the skin, and topples over, snoring. That night they sharpen a great stake and heat its tip in the fire, and drive it straight into his one enormous eye. Polyphemus screams loud enough to wake the whole island, and his neighbors come running.
Polyphemus, why the screaming? Is somebody hurting you?
Nobody is hurting me.
If nobody is hurting you, then stop shouting and let us all sleep.
The giants shrug and shuffle off into the dark. Genius. The next morning, the giant rolls the door open and feels the back of every sheep going out. So the men escape, clinging to the sheep's bellies, where he can't feel them. They're free. And this is where Odysseus makes the worst mistake of his life. Sailing away, clean escape, he just can't resist gloating, and he yells his real name across the water. Big mistake. Because Polyphemus is the son of Poseidon, the god of the sea himself. The blind giant lifts his face and prays to his father, "Let this man lose everything, lose every friend, and crawl home years too late to a house full of trouble." And the god of the sea was listening. From that moment, the sea itself is out to get him. A wind god takes pity and hands Odysseus a leather bag holding every storm wind on earth, tied shut, leaving just a gentle breeze to nudge him home. It works perfectly. For 9 days they sail, and on the 10th Ithaca appears, close enough to see people lighting little fires on the shore. He's home, and then Odysseus falls asleep. His crew, convinced the mysterious bag is stuffed with gold he's hiding from them, open it. Every storm on earth explodes out at once and blasts them all the way back to the start. So close, then it gets worse. They land near a nation of giant cannibals who stand on the cliffs and drop boulders straight down onto the fleet. In minutes, 11 of the 12 ships are smashed and their crews are eaten. Odysseus escapes with one ship, and that is all he has left. That one ship reaches the island of a witch named Circe, who invites the men to a beautiful feast, and then turns them into pigs. Actual pigs. Odysseus, tipped off by a god and carrying a magic herb, survives her spell, forces her to change his men back, and then, because he is Odysseus, moves in with her for a year. Before Circe finally lets him go, she tells him he has to make one detour first to the land of the dead. So Odysseus sails to the edge of the world, digs a pit and calls the ghosts up out of it. A blind prophet hands him the route home, plus one strict rule will come back too. Then the dead crowd in. He sees his own mother and learns she died of grief, waiting for him. 3 times he reaches out to hug her, and 3 times his arms close on nothing but air. And he meets Achilles, the single greatest warrior who ever lived, who died young in exchange for eternal fame.
Achilles, no man was ever blessed like you. Alive, we honored you like a god. And now you rule the dead. What is there to mourn?
Don't dress up death for me, Odysseus. I would rather be alive, a poor man's hired hand, breaking my back in someone's field, than be king over all these dead.
The bravest hero in Greek myth, looking him in the eye and saying, "The glory wasn't worth it. Just get home. Back out on the water. The way home is a gauntlet." First, the Sirens, creatures whose singing is so beautiful that sailors steer straight onto the rocks just to keep listening and drown. Odysseus wants to hear it and live, so he plugs his crew's ears with wax, has them tie him to the mast, and orders them not to untie him, no matter how hard he begs. He hears the song, fights the ropes like a madman, and lives, the only man who ever did. Next comes an impossible choice, a narrow channel with a monster on each side. On one cliff, Scylla, 6 heads, 3 rows of teeth. On the other, Charybdis, a whirlpool that swallows the entire sea. Aim for the whirlpool. You lose everyone. Aim for the monster. You lose 6 men. Odysseus picks the monster. 6 of his men are plucked, screaming off the deck, calling his name. He said it was the most pitiful thing he ever saw. And then, the one rule. On the next island graze the cattle of the sun god, and the prophet had been crystal clear. Do not touch them. But the wind pins them on that island for a month. The food runs out, and while Odysseus is asleep, his starving crew slaughters the sacred cows. The sun god demands justice. The sky god provides it. A single thunderbolt blows the last ship to splinters and drowns every man on board. Every man, except one. Odysseus set out to bring his crew home. Now Odysseus has no crew. Alone and half drowned, he washes up on the island of a goddess named Calypso, and she falls for him. She keeps him there for 7 years, and offers him a deal almost nobody could refuse. Stay with me, and I'll make you immortal. Never grow old, never die. Live forever in paradise beside a goddess. And Odysseus says no. Every single day he sits on the beach and cries, staring out at the sea, because he would rather grow old and die beside his wife than live forever without her. In the end, even the gods are moved, and they order Calypso to release him. He builds a raft. Poseidon smashes it one last time, and he washes ashore, naked and battered, right in front of a young princess doing her laundry. Her family turns out to be kind, generous, and lucky enough to own magical ships that steer themselves. They listen to his entire unbelievable story, and then they sail him home while he sleeps. After 20 years, Odysseus is finally back on Ithaca, but so are the 108 men still trying to marry his wife, and not one of them knows he's home. A goddess Athena has been quietly on his side this whole time, and now she disguises him as a filthy old beggar, so he can walk into his own palace unrecognized and find out exactly who to trust. The very first one to know him is his dog. Argos, a puppy when Odysseus sailed away, is now ancient, half-blind, lying forgotten on a pile of dung. He lifts his head, recognizes his master after 20 years, wags his tail once, and dies. Inside, the suitors kick the beggar around for fun. They have no idea who he is. And then Penelope, still stalling, announces a contest. She'll marry whichever man can string her husband's great bow and fire a single arrow through a line of 12 axe heads. It is Odysseus's bow. It is a trick that really only Odysseus can do. One by one, the strongest suitors strain at the bow, and can't even bend it enough to string it. Then the old beggar asks for a turn. They laugh at him. He picks up the bow, strings it in one smooth motion, and puts an arrow clean through all the 12. And then he turns the bow on the room. The first arrow goes through the throat of the loudest suitor. The doors are already locked. There is no way out. And the cleverest, and by now angriest, man in Greece with his son at his side and a goddess at his back kills every last one of them. Only one person still isn't convinced. Penelope has had her hopes crushed before, and she's not about to throw her arms around a stranger. So she sets one final trap for him.
He must be worn out from his journey. Move the big bed out of our chamber and make it up for him here in the hall.
Move it? Who has moved my bed? I built that bed myself, around a living olive tree, its roots still deep in the ground. I carved our whole bedroom around that trunk. You'd have to cut the tree down to move it an inch.
Only my husband could know that.
And that is how she knows. 20 years of war, monsters, witches, and gods, and the thing that finally proves who he is a bed. They had both been waiting the entire time. Neither of them ever gave up. That's the Odyssey, almost 3,000 years old. And you already speak it. A long, brutal journey is an Odyssey. A wise guide who shapes your life is a mentor. That is a character's name from this exact poem. A temptation you can't resist is a siren song. Stuck between two equally bad options, you're caught between Scylla and Charybdis. In the end, it's the story of a man who was offered the chance to become a god and chose instead to go home, grow old, and die as himself, because all he ever wanted was to go home. If you enjoyed this, subscribe and tell me down in the comments which story I should tell next.